All right, let's dive right in, shall we? Today's deep dive is going to be all about the Turing test. We're going to explore it from, well, a philosopher's perspective.
Right, the Turing test, it's a fascinating thought experiment, trying to figure out if a machine can actually, well, think like a human, or at least, seem like it can.
Exactly, and we're going to use the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on the Turing test as our kind of like our guide for this, but we're not going to,
Oh,
skim the surface.
oh no, we're going deep. We're talking about not just like, how the test works, but all the really juicy philosophical questions it brings up.
So for our listeners who, maybe haven't encountered the Turing test before, let's start with the basics. What's the setup here?
Okay, so imagine a game, right? It's actually called the imitation game, and you've got three players: the interrogator, the human, and the machine.
They're all kept separate, right? Like they can't see each other.
Yeah, totally separate. And the interrogator's job is to figure out who's who just by talking to them, asking questions, analyzing the answers, that kind of thing.
So it's like a high-stakes guessing game where the machine is trying to, like, throw off the interrogator.
Exactly. The machine's goal is to blend in, to sound so human that the interrogator can't tell them apart from the actual human player. It's really a test of, well, deception in a way.
And that's where it gets philosophically interesting, right? Like, what does it even mean for a machine to win this game? Does that mean it's actually thinking?
That's the big question, isn't it? Like, does passing the Turing test mean a machine has actually achieved human-level intelligence?
Right. Because Turing, back when he first proposed this in 1950, he predicted that machines would eventually get so good at this imitation game that they'd fool a lot of people.
Yeah, he was a real visionary. And he even put a timeline on it, like 50 years or so.
So here we are, right in the middle of that prediction. Have machines passed the test?
Well, there have been some interesting attempts. You've got the Loebner Prize, this annual competition where they run Turing tests. But so far, no machine has consistently fooled the judges, especially the expert ones.
So not quite there yet, but maybe we're getting close.
Maybe, maybe. Turing also said it could take a century or more for machines to pass a truly unrestricted Turing test. He knew it wouldn't be easy.
And to really understand why, we need to dig into the objections, right? Like the philosophical arguments against the idea that machines can think.
Absolutely. Turing himself outlined 9 major objections, and these are the real meat of the matter, philosophically speaking.
Yeah, let's get into those. Starting with, I guess, the most fundamental one, the theological objection.
Right. The idea here is that, well, it's based on substance dualism, the belief that the mind or the soul is something separate from the body, something non-material.
So no matter how complex machine we build, it can't truly think because it doesn't have that special non-material essence, right?
Right. It's like saying a computer is just a bunch of circuits and wires, but true thought requires something more, something beyond the physical.
So from this perspective, creating a thinking machine would be like, I don't know, trying to build the soul out of silicon.
Pretty much. But Turing, he was so clever, he pointed out this little loophole in the argument. It assumes that only God can create a soul, right?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So if we accept that, then why couldn't God, theoretically decide to give a soul to a machine? It's not explicitly ruled out.
So even from a theological standpoint, the possibility of a machine, I don't know, having a soul isn't totally off the table. It's just it kind of shifts the focus of the question.
Exactly. Now let's move on to another one, the heads in the sand objection. This one is, well, it's more about human fear than anything else.
Fear of what? Machines taking over.
That's part of it, sure, but it's also a fear of the unknown, of being, intellectually surpassed by our own creations, losing our special place in the universe.
So it's like, I don't even want to think about the possibility of thinking machines because it scares me.
Yeah, pretty much. And Turing, he understood that fear, but he argued that, fear doesn't actually address the core question. It's a separate issue entirely.
Right. It's like saying, I don't want it to be true, therefore it can't be true.
Exactly. He suggests that if we can accept that other human beings have minds based on their behavior, then we should apply the same logic to machines. If a machine acts intelligently, why should we automatically assume it's not really thinking?
Okay, that's a good point. Now let's tackle a more technical objection, the mathematical objection. This one gets into some pretty complex territory.
Yeah, this one delves into some heady stuff like Gödel's incompleteness theorems and the halting problem. But basically, the argument is that formal systems, like the kind that computers are based on, have inherent limitations.
Limitations in what sense?
Limitations in what they can prove. There will always be true statements that these systems can't prove within their own rules.
So if computers are essentially formal systems, then they might inherit these limitations too. They can't know everything.
Exactly, and that's the crux of the mathematical objection. Because of these limitations, computers can never truly think like humans who presumably aren't bound by these same constraints.
But here's the thing, and Turing pointed this out. Are humans really exempt from these limitations? Do we have some special access to, like, ultimate truth that goes beyond formal systems?
That's a great question. And honestly, philosophers and mathematicians are still debating that today. Like, do we humans have a kind of knowledge that transcends logic and mathematics?
Right, maybe we're not as different from machines as we think. Or maybe, maybe we are. It's still a mystery.
It really is. And it's these kinds of questions that make the Turing test so fascinating, so enduring. It's not just about building clever machines, it's about understanding what it means to think, to be intelligent in the broadest sense. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about the argument from consciousness. This one, this one really gets into like the heart of what it means to, well, to have a mind.
Right, like is there more to thinking than just processing information? Does it require feelings, emotions, that kind of thing?
Exactly. And Turing, he actually quotes this Professor Jefferson, who he believed that a machine can't really think unless it can feel, like feel joy when it succeeds or sadness when it fails, even like, feeling flattered by a compliment.
So real, genuine emotions, not just like simulating them, but actually experiencing them.
Right. And Turing, he didn't just, dismiss this idea out of hand. He acknowledged that, yeah, feeling, self-awareness, they're hallmarks of human consciousness, right?
But did he think machines could ever achieve that? Like real, genuine emotions?
Well, he proposed this interesting possibility. He said, what if a machine could express emotions so convincingly that it was impossible to tell the difference between, the machine's expression and a human's genuine feelings?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Like, think about how AI can already write poems or compose music that makes us feel things. It can evoke emotional responses in us.
Right, exactly. So the question is that enough? Like, if a machine can create something that makes us feel sad, does that mean the machine itself understands sadness?
That's a really tricky question.
Yeah.
It gets at, like, the difference between mimicking something and actually experiencing it.
Yeah, it's a question that still, keeps philosophers and scientists up at night. Like, is there something unique about human consciousness? Something that can't be replicated in, I don't know, silicon and code?
It makes you wonder if there's some kind of, like, secret ingredient to consciousness that we haven't figured out yet.
Maybe, maybe. Okay, now Turing also addressed this whole cluster of objections that he called the arguments from various disabilities. Basically, he listed all these things that people said machines could never do.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Oh, all sorts of things. Be kind, be resourceful, be beautiful, have a sense of humor, even like enjoy strawberries and cream.
Strawberries and cream. That seems like a rather specific disability.
Right. It's a funny list, but Turing's point is that it reveals this kind of like human bias we have when we think about intelligence. We tend to define it in terms of, well, ourselves.
So by pointing out these disabilities, he was saying, hey, maybe our definition of intelligence is too narrow.
That's exactly it. He was challenging us to think, why are we so sure that these qualities are unique to humans? Couldn't a sufficiently advanced AI, at least in theory, exhibit these qualities too?
It's like we're judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Right. Maybe we need to, like, expand our idea of what intelligence can look like.
I like that analogy. Like maybe an AI could show kindness through its actions, even if it doesn't experience emotions the same way we do.
Right. It's about the outcome, not necessarily the internal process.
Okay, so let's move on to another big one, Lady Lovelace's objection. This one deals with creativity.
Creativity. That's always felt like a very human thing, What was Lady Lovelace's argument?
Well, Lady Lovelace, she was a brilliant mathematician, one of the first to work on like mechanical computers way back in the day. And she argued that, machines can only do what they're programmed to do. They can't be truly original.
That makes sense. Like a computer can only work with the data and instructions it's given.
Right. But Turing, he countered with this really thought-provoking question. Do humans truly originate anything in a deterministic universe? Like, if everything is cause and effect, do we really have free will to create something new? Or are our creative acts just the result of, a really long chain of prior events?
Whoa, okay, that's getting deep. Like, are we really the authors of our own thoughts and actions?
Right. It makes you question our own sense of agency. And we think about all the incredible things humans have created, art, music, technology. Even if it all comes down to, a complex set of causes and effects, it's still pretty amazing.
Yeah, and computers can create amazing things too. Like, who's to say that a computer composing a symphony isn't a form of creativity, even if it's based on algorithms?
Exactly. It kind of blurs the lines, doesn't it? The Turing test, it's really about judging behavior, not the internal workings of a mind. Okay, let's move on to the argument from continuity of the nervous system. This one's about the biology of thinking.
Okay, you lay it on me.
So the argument is that the human brain, with all its neurons and the way information flows continuously, it's just fundamentally different from a digital computer, which processes information in these like discrete steps.
So it's like an analog versus digital kind of argument. Like, the brain is analog and a computer is digital, and they just can't be the same.
Yeah, something like that. But Turing, he pointed out that even if our brains work in a continuous way, a digital computer can still simulate that process. Like, how you can approximate a curve with a bunch of tiny straight
Oh,
lines.
I see. So as computers get more powerful, those approximations can get really, really close to the real thing.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, we still don't fully understand how consciousness arises from the physical structure of the brain. So it's an open question whether a computer, you know, with enough processing power could one day reach a level of complexity that rivals the human brain, at least in terms of producing intelligent behavior.
It's like we're trying to figure out how a car engine works by just listening to the sound it makes.
Hmm.
We're still figuring out what consciousness is, let alone whether a machine can have it.
Exactly. Okay, now for the argument from informality of behavior. This one, it basically says that human behavior is just too unpredictable and nuanced to be captured by any set of rules. Whereas machines, they're inherently rule bound.
So it's like humans are spontaneous and adaptable,
Mm.
but machines are rigid and predictable.
Right, but Turing, he pointed out that it's not so simple. Like, if the universe is deterministic, if everything is cause and effect, then both humans and machines are bound by those laws.
So maybe the distinction between rule-bound machines and freewheeling humans isn't so clear-cut after all.
Exactly. Turing argued that even if human behavior isn't totally rule-bound, it's not random either. We have patterns, preferences, tendencies that can be observed and, to some extent, predicted.
And who's to say that a really advanced machine couldn't learn and adapt its behavior in a similar way, like becoming more nuanced and less predictable over time?
Right. It all comes back to that core question. Can a machine act so intelligently that it passes for human, even if its internal workings are different? Now, get ready for this one. The last objection we'll cover today. It ventures into, well, the paranormal, the argument from extrasensory perception.
ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Turing, he was actually kind of fascinated by ESP.
So he entertained the idea that humans might have abilities beyond the five senses.
He did, and he acknowledged that if humans had ESP, it could totally mess up the Turing test. Imagine, like, an interrogator using telepathy to read the human participant's mind. The machine wouldn't stand a chance.
That's a wild thought. Did Turing have a solution for this, like ESP problem?
He did, actually. He joked about conducting the Turing test in a, telepathy-proof room. But here's the really interesting part. He also suggested that if humans can have ESP, why not machines?
So a machine could be telepathic too. That's a mind-blowing concept.
It is, right. It pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible, both for minds and for technology. But it shows that the Turing test, it's really about testing for intelligence however it manifests.
Like Turing was saying, bring on the ESP. Let's see if machines can match or even surpass human intelligence in every way imaginable.
That's a great way to put it. He was open to all the possibilities, no matter how strange or unfamiliar.
Wow, that was a lot, huh? 9 objections, and Turing had a response for each one. It's pretty amazing
Yeah.
how these arguments, from like 75 years ago are still so relevant today.
It really shows how far ahead of his time Turing was. He was thinking about these deep philosophical questions long before AI was even, well, a real thing.
Right, like he was laying the groundwork for all the debates we're having now about,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, consciousness, all that stuff.
But the conversation, it doesn't end with Turing's responses.
Hmm.
There's another big one we have to talk about, the Chinese room argument.
Oh yeah, the Chinese room. That's
Yeah.
a classic. It's about like whether a machine can really understand language, even if it can, you know, use it perfectly.
That's the gist of it. Okay, so imagine this. You're locked in a room and you don't know any Chinese, right? But you've got this giant rule book for manipulating Chinese symbols.
Okay, I'm following so far.
And people outside the room, they slip you questions written in Chinese. And you use this rule book to create responses also in Chinese.
So I'm like a human computer, basically, just
Yeah.
following a program to process symbols.
Precisely. And you get so good at using this rule book that the people outside, they start to believe that you actually understand Chinese.
But the catch is, I don't really understand it, right? I'm
Yeah.
just manipulating symbols according to the rules.
Right. You have no idea what those symbols mean, no real comprehension.
And the point of the Chinese room argument is that this is how computers work, too.
Hmm.
They can process information and spit out answers, but they don't really get the meaning behind it all.
Exactly. So the argument goes, even if a machine passes the Turing test, even if it sounds just like a human, it doesn't necessarily mean it's truly understanding what it's saying. It might just be a really sophisticated symbol manipulator.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty big challenge to the whole idea of the Turing test. Like, how do we know if a machine is really thinking or if it's just faking it really, really well?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Chinese room, it doesn't, totally invalidate the Turing test, but it throws this big philosophical wrench into the works.
It makes us question whether behavior alone is enough to judge intelligence.
Right. Maybe we need to look deeper,
Mm.
beyond just the surface of language and behavior to see if there's real understanding, real consciousness behind it all.
So where does that leave us? We've gone through all these objections, all these arguments, and it seems like there's still no easy answer to the question. Can machines think?
Well, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The Turing test, it's not about finding a simple yes or no answer. It's about prompting us to ask deeper questions about what it means to be human, what it means to think, to be intelligent.
That's almost like a philosophical puzzle that we're still trying to solve.
Exactly. And as AI keeps advancing, as we encounter these, increasingly sophisticated machines, we need to keep these questions in mind. The questions the Turing test forces us to ask.
Like when you're talking to a chatbot that sounds almost human, or listening to a piece of music composed by AI, ask yourself, is this just clever programming, or is there something more going on here? Is there a spark of real intelligence, real understanding behind it all?
That's the challenge, and maybe someday a machine will pass the Turing test in a way that convinces even the most skeptical among us. But until then, the exploration continues.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Turing test. It's been a wild ride, but hopefully it's left you with more questions than answers and a newfound appreciation for the enduring power of this thought experiment.